Hello, my name is Laufie, and I'm one of the lucky people who got to participate in the recent Blue Protocol network test. Since the purpose of this video is to review how the game felt to me in this network test, I will be steering away from my normal format of keeping things objective, and will be providing a lot of my own thoughts and opinions based on my own experiences. That being said, I encourage discussion about any of the things I'm going to mention, so if you disagree with anything here or had a different experience yourself, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments. In the process of writing the script and putting all my thoughts together, I realized that every pro and con had a but attached to it. So in favor of covering everything I want in a concise manner, I won't be splitting the video into the good and the bad, and instead we'll just cover a handful of key topics with all the negatives and positives included right away. A lot of people in my past videos noticed how fast I talk and asked me if I even breathe or if I have lungs in the first place. To answer this question, I'm not superhuman. I'm simply someone who has been playing MMORPGs for the majority of my life, so I trained my lungs to have incredibly high capacity after holding my breath waiting for a good MMO. Quick side note, Lost Ark is currently my main game and majority of my audience is from that game as well, so fair warning, I will be drawing a few comparisons between the two games to compare experiences and provide examples, since this is a video about my experiences. Let's get into it. Upon launching the game for the first time, I was immediately reminded of what an absolute talented beast Hiroyuki Sawano is, the composer for a lot of the music in this game. He has worked with Bandai before to compose a lot of music for Mobile Suit Gundam UC, which already gives his work a special place in my heart, as well as some iconic pieces in Aldnoah Zero, Attack on Titan, and Kill la Kill, to name a few. It's a huge flex to have his name behind the music in this game already. The customization in this game is extensive enough, allowing for face, body, and hair customization that a lot of other MMOs don't put too much emphasis on. It's quite a refreshing thing after Lost Ark, where you can only customize the face and the hair, and even that is pretty limited. You can make your character truly your own and unique, which for me is a massive part of the general MMO experience. The one small gripe I have with Blue Protocol customization as a whole is that I would have appreciated an availability of multiple races to choose from, whereas in this game you can just play as a human and that's it. It's not a make or break issue for me for sure, but with how beautiful the anime-inspired cel-shaded graphics are in Blue Protocol, I think a variety of more humanoid or even monster-type races would have fit really well into the game. That being said though, that's something that will have to fit into the lore and simply wasn't part of Bandai's vision, which I can respect. Upon finishing my character, I was met with a peculiar button that I've never seen in any other MMO. A button for a physics test, so to speak. Specifically jiggle physics. On a male character you would only jiggle the hair, for better or for worse, but on female characters, well... I mean, listen, Bandai knows the consumer! Upon finalizing my character's look, I was met with a choice for my class from a list of 5. I will recognize that it's a little too early to say this, but I'm gonna say it nonetheless. 5 feels like a little too few, especially coupled with the fact that they're kind of cookie cutter and not all that unique. You've got the WoW raid leader with the baby crying in the background, archer.jpg, mage.jpg, and isekai'd Olaf. I'm not saying this is a diss to the game by any means though, as I firmly believe that a number of standard cookie cutter classes is necessary in every MMORPG, as a lot of players typically have a niche that they tend to stick to in every game, so having a number of very basic class archetypes you will see in every game is not a bad thing whatsoever. The last class on the list is more recently made one that feels very unique, as the weapon they wield is basically a big spoon they hit people with that also holds a ball you can use as a boomerang. Doesn't sound like anything I've seen before, so I hope that in the future we will get a consistent mix of typical and unique classes. In favor of treating the test as a test, I ended up making a total of 3 characters and trying the classes that resonated with me the most: Twin Striker, the Archer, and the Mage. Upon getting all 3 to the first solo dungeon you have to complete in the process of leveling, I settled on the Twin Striker, favoring its fast-paced gameplay focused on constantly dodging and moving around to avoid damage, and dealing bursty chunks of damage of my own, which heavily reminded me of the love of my life, enhanced weapon Deadeye in Lost Ark. The playstyle for the Archer and the Mage felt slow. Too slow for me. Which sounds kind of stupid to say out loud, as that is typically what you would expect out of a ranged class. Instead of dodging, you stand back and cast, so I really don't want to say that ranged classes in Blue Protocol are boring. I think they just felt too slow for me because I have a very heavy bias towards classes that have cracked mobility, so this is all very subjective. Combat-wise, whether for ranged or for melee, the game felt fantastic. It felt polished and basically ready to ship. The one small complaint I had is that sometimes my character would randomly swap targets to a different mob that I wasn't attacking at the time if I was fighting a group of them at once. Kind of like when you charge up a strong melee attack in Cyberpunk, but instead of attacking the guy right in front of you, the game launches you in the direction of a sniper you didn't even know was there. But Laufie, what do you mean swap targets? Isn't this an action combat MMORPG? Well, mostly yes, but also kind of no. There is no tab targeting in the game, and 99% of the time it does function like a legitimate non-target action combat game. However, upon actually playing the game myself, the combat felt less like true action combat like Terra for example, and more like Blade and Soul, where it is technically action combat, but your character kind of soft locks onto an enemy if you're looking at it, and your character will sometimes pivot a skill to that enemy if you're using abilities a little to the side of it. Again, not a huge issue for me personally, and probably a very beneficial feature for ranged classes, but it is one of those things that's not really noticeable if you're watching gameplay footage of the game and not playing it yourself. Having to choose only 4 skills to equip for my class was also a little sad for me, especially with how long most of the cooldowns were. If I'm soloing a boss or a mob that has a lot of health, which is the case for a lot of them, I had to sit there and auto-attack for a long time. It didn't ruin the experience for me, but it did leave me wishing for more. Personally, I typically like piano classes, and with Lost Ark currently being my main game, even there I ended up maining Deadeye, which has more than the standard 8 skills because he has several stances, effectively doubling the amount of skills to 16. So if you like piano classes like me, the combat may feel a little lackluster to you. However, the network test was capped at level 20, which I didn't even end up getting to before I got error 102'd along with many other people, so who knows, there is a possibility that in the future as you evolve your skills to higher levels, maybe they get a little bit more CDR. I think it can be said for any MMORPG that a class will always feel better at endgame with some nice gear compared to when it's at beginner levels, so no hard conclusions drawn there yet, simply how it felt for me with how far I got into the game. Despite only really liking one class, I want to emphasize how amazing it is to me that you can play every single class in the game on one character, effectively eliminating a need for alts. I don't even need to say what game is the culprit of making me feel this liberated about this. Although, since I was sticking to one class, I didn't actually get to experience how difficult or grindy it is to level your alt class once you're done with a lot of the missions and quests that give you a good chunk of XP. My assumption is that it will be a grindy process similar to Final Fantasy XIV, but that's not necessarily something that annoys me personally. Speaking of leveling, I know a lot of my friends and other creators who got into the network test voiced discontent about how slow the progression feels. I do agree with the observation, but not the negative sentiment behind it. I'm sure a big reason why the leveling feels slower than it otherwise would be is because it took me a really long time to figure out what was being asked of me since I cannot read Japanese. So between trial and error and trying to make sense of the quest objectives through a scuffed translator, I've probably effectively doubled the amount of time it would have otherwise taken me. Oh my god, let me out. I just CC'd myself in here forever. I don't know how to leave. Oh god, I reset it. Oh my god, what am I doing? Please, I just want to leave. I just want to, oh my god, I just want to leave. Wait. However, that aside, the leveling itself is pretty non-linear, employing a combination of questing, dungeon grinding, gathering, crafting, and completing your adventure board, which is a kind of a book with challenges that unlock more challenges as you complete the existing ones. These challenges ask you to do a plethora of different things, like gather a certain amount of materials in a specific zone, kill certain mobs in a specific zone, craft gear pieces, run dungeons, whatever. And the more of them you do, the more of them you unlock. A lot of people had an issue with this, but I didn't really see this as a negative. Yes, some of the drop rates for an item from a mob felt grindy, but immediately following the network test, the developers addressed this directly, saying they plan to change these drop rates in the future. I think the Western MMORPG player base has a FOMO issue, which is at the core of this concern. The reality is that our MMO market is oversaturated with Eastern MMORPGs that come out in our region after they existed for some time in their native region, which enables a small group of people to play through the game ahead of everyone else and write up countless guides and spreadsheets on the fastest way to level to max level, top 20 hidden chests to pick up, how I got to max level in 20 hours, and all of that. Western MMO player is in a unique situation where the existence of these guides and spreadsheets builds up a pressure to utilize them in favor of getting ahead of the curve, instead of relaxing and experiencing the game slowly and deliberately, taking everything in one step at a time and pausing to appreciate small elements of the game. And I am not exempt from this either. Shortly following the Blue Protocol network test, I took a 5-day break from streaming because I didn't want to go back to Lost Ark. Not because I hate Lost Ark by any means, but because I've played it for 4 years at this point, and the network test made me realize just how much I missed that liberating feeling of just not giving a fuck about how fast my progression is, and instead just sitting back and exploring something new at my own pace and appreciating all the things that the game has to offer, figuring things out on my own and digesting them slowly with enjoyment instead of force-feeding it to myself through a tube made of guides and spreadsheets until I convulse and burn out. You ever notice how a lot of the times when we talk about really enjoying a game in the past, it's from a time of its beta? Wouldn't you agree that at least partially is due to the fact that we played without care, knowing that our progress will get wiped anyway once the beta is over, so we might as well fuck around? Leveling in Blue Protocol feels heavily aimed at being a core part of the experience instead of something you just zoom through as fast as possible so you can finally get to the fun part. I can appreciate hand-holding in MMOs to an extent where all you gotta do is follow the main quest, skip some dialogue, and boom, you're at endgame. But since Bandai very clearly wants us to enjoy the leveling process instead of burning through it, why not follow suit and actually try to do that? Personally, I could care less that after 20 hours of playing Blue Protocol I only got to about level 15, because a lot of those 20 hours was spent looking into other classes, climbing random mountains, running around, gathering just for the fuck of it, or exploring the main hub city. Everyone has their own way to enjoy things, but since Blue Protocol won't be coming out in the West after like 3 years of existing in Japan, we have a unique opportunity. An opportunity to explore a game that will be brand new for us and for its native region. Personally, I intend to not squander that opportunity and enjoy the game at my own pace, exploring it alongside the vast majority of new players. I advise you to do the same. A lot of us miss the old days of MMOs, but can't quite put our finger on what's so different now compared to back then. Aside from the fact that most MMOs come out and shortly turn to shit, I think a big chunk of that enjoyment came from the fact that we weren't as jaded and burnt out as we are now. Just pretend you're in high school again and enjoy the game one step at a time. The emphasis of adventure is at every corner of Blue Protocol. There's no passive health regen in the open world, but there's campfire areas that you can light up and sit down next to so you can regen your health. The XP doesn't build fast, having you utilize different systems in the game to progress. You have to earn your gear through obtaining materials for it and crafting it, which takes a long time, instead of the quest just handing you a new item for no reason. Even the story of your character is that of waking up with amnesia, so your character is exploring the world and learning it together with you. So go on and have an adventure of your own, and try to keep the FOMO at bay to the best of your ability. I don't think you'll regret that decision. Speaking of my character being a representation of myself in the world, I wish I could have beef with others. Not in the drama type of way, but in the PvP kind of way. I know, PvP in MMOs is usually heavy copium, but that has never stopped me from enjoying it while it lasts. I think as it stands, this is the biggest wish I have for the game, is to eventually have some sort of arena mode I can do for fun. At the end of the day, I am a PvP Andy at heart, which is the sole reason I played Lost Ark to begin with, and Blade and Soul, and Terra, and World of Warcraft. And Arcade, you name it. It's only recently that I've pivoted towards enjoying PvE in games, which to me is almost harder than enjoying scuffed MMO PvP. So the lack of any PvP in the game puts me in a position of having very high hopes for the PvE, because the reality is, for a lot of Eastern MMORPGs, is that they reel you in with beautifully crafted combat, amazing customization, and gorgeous world, and after you commit, you slowly realize that they had all the talented people develop these areas of the game, and the actual endgame content feels like it was developed by unpaid interns. But at that point, you're too far in to give up. It's a catch-22, and seeing as Blue Protocol has all the prerequisites to follow the same path alongside with basically everybody else, I'm hoping that the endgame of Blue Protocol will be interesting and engaging enough to keep my attention beyond just logging in because it's fun to click buttons. Historically, Bandai has been stellar at listening to player feedback and implementing things in the game that the player had discontent for, or outright removing or reworking systems from the ground up, so it's not looking too bad so far, especially leading into my next point. The hottest take of this video. You ready? I'm glad Amazon is publishing it. I really am. And before you throw tomatoes at me for saying this, you gotta hear me out. That's how this works on the internet, right? You might be thinking, how can you possibly say this after you've played Lost Ark for so long? The question has the answer inside of it. I've been streaming Lost Ark since before it even launched in the West, so I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of my friends who have worked directly with Amazon on Lost Ark content, or simply know people who work for AGS. My friends do, not me, that is. I will exclude New World fuck-ups from this, because in New World, Amazon is the developer. In Lost Ark, they are a publisher, which is their exact title for Blue Protocol. What I've been told by many of my friends, whom I have no reason to doubt, is that Smilegate is notoriously bad at communicating with AGS in a timely manner. AGS is typically handed a large patch they're supposed to implement just about a day ahead of the planned date. On top of that, Amazon doesn't have the free decision-making most people think they do. The ill-fated Fion Gate was a decision that came from Smilegate, not Amazon. The cadence of class releases is also entirely decided by Smilegate. Drought timing, raid launches, buffs or nerfs, catch-up events, roadmaps, in-game bug fixes, all of that comes from Smilegate, with Amazon just being there to translate and implement the patch to their servers. Even the censorship or change of some of the models is something that Smilegate does for Amazon, because Amazon doesn't develop any of these things themselves. The best they can do is ask Smilegate for it, and if Smilegate is on board, they cooperate. So why am I glad they're publishing Blue Protocol? Well, because Amazon has a lot of resources at their disposal. In my opinion, they will provide good servers for the game, which is imperative for a game with a lot of hype around it. Coupled with the fact that, as mentioned before, Bandai is good at communicating with the player base and implementing changes, I think with good communication between them, they will have a decent team for the game. Blue Protocol hasn't even launched anywhere yet, and Bandai has already separately acknowledged the Western region in one of their streams, and thanked the Western players for their interest in the game in English, which was an awesome gesture after watching Loa On in 2022 and not seeing the Western region of Lost Ark mentioned or even acknowledged anywhere, bar the singular line of text at the bottom of the screen that the free rewards they were previewing will only be available for KR players. Obviously, the source of all of this is Trust Me Bro, so I heavily encourage you to take all of this with a grain of salt. But from where I'm standing, after having multiple chances to talk to some Amazon employees directly as well, to me they felt like a passionate bunch that's just stuck in a tough place of having to bear the brunt of the anger for mistakes they didn't even make themselves. At the end of the day, Blue Protocol will be a free-to-play game, and I find myself reiterating this a lot on stream when people ask me if X is worth trying out. Give Blue Protocol a try without giving them a single dime of your money, and if it lives up to your expectations enough, then commit to it financially if you so choose, and always within reason. I was skeptical about including this opinion in this video as it tends to be a very polarizing topic, so let me just say this. If you're someone who's heavily skeptical about Amazon or plain don't believe what I'm saying, that's cool, and I respect it. My objective was to provide a perspective that's not frequently talked about or explored. Whatever your opinion you hold on this specific topic, I think holding a healthy amount of skepticism when it comes to any new games coming out is always a good and necessary thing to do. All we can do is hope that Bandai and Amazon work well in tandem and deliver a great experience for us that's worth sticking around for. As a side note, I do know that a lot of people actually complained about the game being laggy and having really low FPS. I'm running a 3080 Ti. It's a pretty good graphics card, but I don't have like a NASA PC by any means, and I had no issues with FPS, even in town with all of the players gathered there at like the peak hours of the network test. So I don't know what it actually depends on, but personally, loading screens, FPS issues, any of that stuff, I personally didn't experience, which is why I don't really touch on it in this video. But just seeing after some time of editing this video how many people have that as a major complaint about the game, I didn't experience that at all. So again, I'm not really sure what it depends on, but I didn't have any of those issues whatsoever. Another thing I've noticed a lot of complaints coming from is when you get to the first dungeon, you are going to be around level 7 or 10-ish, and the dungeon has level 12-ish mobs. If you just followed the main story and didn't really worry about your gear that much and were questing the entire time leading up to the dungeon, your gear score will probably be somewhere around 200 something, whereas the dungeon requires you to be 720 gear score. That being said, I didn't notice this at first because at a certain point in the game I just disregarded all the text because I couldn't understand it anyway, so I just went in. And honestly, I nearly soloed the dungeon just on my own. I think the only reason I ran out of time is because I got lost for a while, didn't know where to go because the map is this kind of labyrinth with several floors on it. So I got lost for a good 3 to 4 minutes just trying to find where I should be going next to progress in the dungeon. If I had enough time, I actually could have soloed the entire thing without having to get to item level 700 whatever that the game requires you to be. So those indicators for saying that you need to be a certain level and a certain gear score, those are more like advice the game giving you for a very simple and easy clear. I did run out of time, but honestly, if I knew exactly where to go at my level and my tiny 200 something gear score, I could have soloed that dungeon and not worried about getting to 720 gear score. I was less than half of the gear score that the dungeon requires you, quote unquote, to be, and I still almost soloed it. And, you know, I'm not an amazing player by any means. I think that just goes to show that people kind of take these things literally in the game. You don't actually have to grind to that exact gear score to clear the dungeon. And I mean, I don't know if Twin Striker is just broken or something, but it's very possible to do this dungeon after just getting a couple quick upgrades on your gear and just full sending it in that dungeon. I didn't really feel like I was getting bottlenecked in the game with this dungeon. All I thought was that, well, I'm gonna go explore the rest of the game because it's the network test instead of trying to rerun this dungeon at the same eye level, because once I learned where I had to go, I was confident that I could solo the dungeon if I tried it again. So to me, again, that wasn't that big of an issue. Aside from not getting to experience what the actual endgame loop for Blue Protocol looks like, my experiences with the network test are very positive. I'm a huge sucker for little RP-like details in MMOs like hand-holding, intricate screenshot system, rock, paper, scissors, all that. Come on! Ooh, I got another one. What the fuck? That shit is tiny! What is that? What the fuck, dude? That's some dude from Tinder right there, man. What the fuck is just hyping all this shit up, dude? And this is what I get? Okay, bro. Exploring the world felt good. The combat felt smooth, leveling didn't feel linear, which is something I personally really enjoyed. And aside from some of the personal wishes for the game, like arena or stance swapping class, somehow, I think it stands to be a great game. It's really hard to draw a definitive conclusion from a tiny network test, especially not knowing what the end game looks like, but the network test left me feeling hopeful and excited for the game. If you want to know more about what type of game Blue Protocol is, with a deep dive into its history, monetization, combat mechanics, endgame loop, and all that good stuff, I have a video just like that. This one is void of my own dented opinions and just presents the facts so you can skip doing the research yourself. So check it out if you're curious. And of course, I'm mostly active on my stream at twitch.tv/LaufieLOL, where I currently stream Lost Ark, but we'll be covering everything Blue Protocol in the future, whatever crumbs they decide to give us. I really appreciate you clicking on this video. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I will see you in the next one.